Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's Day of the Science Conference. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes. Give it one more minute. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Jean Hall. I'm the director of the Research and Training Center on Independent Living at the University of Kansas, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's State of the Science virtual conference. This is hosted by the Research and Training Center on Promoting Interventions for Community Living, which in turn is funded by a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Thank you for being here today. I've just got a few informational slides that I'd like to review with you before we get started. First, I'd like to talk about accessibility features. Automated captioning is available on today's call. You can turn on the captioning by clicking on the CC Live Transcript button in the Zoom toolbar. You'll see Show Subtitle, which turns on the captions. And in that same location, you can adjust the size of the captions to meet your needs by selecting Subtitle Settings. We also have sign language interpreters on the webinar today, Jolene Benham and Hannah Randolph. We're using Gallery View in Zoom to see both the shared screen and the interpreter. If you only see the shared screen, go to the top of your Zoom window and move your cursor on the green bar at the top that reads View Options. Then click on the arrow and make sure that you are in the side-by-side mode. And then briefly, for questions and answers, Kelsey Goddard will moderate questions and answers, or questions at least, at the end of the presentation. So we'll answer questions in the order they come in, and we'll try to get through as many as possible, hopefully all of them. To ask a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If the Q&A box is not accessible to you, you can use the raise hand feature. If you're joining by telephone, press *9 to raise your hand. When it's time for questions, Kelsey will call on you and unmute your line so that you can ask your question. Please do not use the chat feature to ask questions to presenters because we may not see it. So the webinar today is the second in our three-part series of our State of the Science webinar on community participation. Next week, September 22nd, is the final installation. It will start an hour later at 2 o'clock Central Time. All of the sessions will be recorded and available for viewing online at the YouTube channel for the Lifespan Institute, which I think someone's going to share a link in the chat box, but if not, we can send that information out to you later. All of the papers presented today are part of a special online supplement to Disability and Health Journal. So if you want to go to the articles these presentations are based on, you can go there. All of the articles are published as open access, so you should be able to get to them without any fees or subscription. And now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Our first speaker is Elena Remillard. Elena is a research scientist at the Center for Inclusive Design and Innovation within the College of Design at the Georgia Institute of Technology. As a master's level gerontologist, Elena serves as both the project coordinator and an investigator for the Rehabilitation Engineering Research Center on Technologies to Support Aging in Place for People Living with Long-Term Disabilities, or TechSAGE. Her specific interests include design and technology for aging in place, technology acceptance among older adults, and tele-exercise programs for older adults with disabilities. Our next speaker will be Dr. Laura Rice. She's an associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology and Community Health at the University of Illinois and interim director of the Master of Public Health and Master of Health Administration programs. Her research focuses on management of secondary impairments associated with physical disabilities and increase in quality of life and community participation. In addition, Dr. Rice is interested in the development of outcomes measures to evaluate functional mobility skills. Dr. Rice also remains active as a seating and mobility specialist. Our third speaker is Lily Greiman. Lily works as a project director at the Research and Training Center on Disability in Rural Communities, or RTC Rural, and has been with that center since 2012. She works across numerous projects with partners across the country and is passionate about the collaborative work the RTC Rural does to improve the lives of people with disabilities in rural communities. Her focus areas are housing, community participation, rural community development, and spatial and demographic analysis. And finally, our last speaker today is Dr. Lindsay Kuhn. She joined the Research and Training Center on Independent Living at KU as Associate Director in October of 2019. She comes to KU after serving as a postdoctoral research associate at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Her research there explored the exercise challenges and needs of adults aging with long-term mobility and sensory disabilities and evaluated the potential of various technologies to support and motivate the physical activity participation. At the RTCIL, she focuses on physical activity and disability and assists with measuring the effects of the home usability and out and about interventions on participants' home usability, community engagement, problem-solving skills, and self-determination. So it's my pleasure to welcome all of them and all of you who are listening to today's event. And we'll start with Elena Remillard.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Let me share screens. All right, I'll go ahead and begin. So again, thank you for having me here today. My name is Elena Remillard, and I'm here on behalf of the TechSage team. Jean spelled that out, so I won't do it for you again. My co-authors on this paper included in the special issue and my presentation today include Dr. Margaret Campbell, who is a former NIDLR advisor for the TechSage Center, Dr. Lindsay Kuhn at the University of Kansas, and the principal investigator of this project, Wendy Rogers, at the University of Illinois. The presentation is entitled Transportation Challenges for Persons Aging with Mobility Disability, Qualitative Insights and Policy Implications. So a little background, many older adults with mobility disabilities lack access to adequate transportation, which can hinder their ability to fully participate in essential and desired activities in the home and community. Among this population, there is a huge reliance on personal vehicles, so either as drivers or passengers for the vast majority of trips. And there's low utilization of local public transportation, paratransit, as well as taxi and rideshare services for this population. So generally, we know about some broad transportation challenges affecting this population, namely accessibility, affordability, and availability. However, there's a need for detailed user insights on these specific issues in order to better support these individuals with transportation. So transportation challenges are likely to be greater and potentially more complex for people aging with long-term disabilities, mobility disabilities acquired in early to midlife. For the purpose of being brief, we're going to call that persons aging with mobility disability. You'll see the shorthand PAWMD. And there's a number of reasons that they are likely to experience more transportation barriers in everyday life. So on top of managing a long-term mobility disability, they may also experience secondary conditions related to that disability, such as pain and depression, age-related conditions such as arthritis, as well as declines in memory, vision, and strength, for example, as well as certain economic disadvantages that are known for this population, such as lower income, higher unemployment, and less access to healthcare. Collectively, this can kind of create the perfect storm for transportation barriers. So as a part of our TechSage user needs project, we developed a study called Access, which stands for Aging Concerns, Challenges, and Everyday Solution Strategies. This is a large-scale mixed method study that includes interviews and questionnaires designed to assess everyday support needs among people aging with disabilities. And this covers a broad range of activities, everything that it means to be a human being in the home and community. And this also includes transportation, which is the focus of the analysis today. The interview is designed to answer the following questions. What is the frequency, nature, and distribution of problems in everyday activities? And also, how are people managing these problems? What are their response strategies? What different devices, tools, or technologies are they using? Are they getting help from other people? Have they developed their own creative methods for problem solving? I've included a screenshot here from our first publication in Disability and Health on the Access study. And the Access study, as I mentioned, it's a large-scale study. This included 180 individuals with long-term vision, hearing, and mobility disabilities. For the purpose of my presentation today, I'm just going to focus on our sample with long-term mobility disabilities. The objectives of the special issue paper and my presentation today is to not only look at transportation challenges among this population, but to do so through a policy lens. And it just so happened that around the same time that Access data collection occurred, which was in 2015 to 2019, this overlapped with a very large piece of legislation known as the FAST Act, Fixing America's Surface Transportation. This occurred in 2015 under the Obama administration. So with this paper, we're really trying to tie together these two components. Briefly, what is the FAST Act? This is $305 billion of transportation infrastructure funding. This included, among many other priorities, the priority to address the lack of reliable transportation among transportation disadvantaged people. They identified these to include older adults, people with disabilities, and low-income individuals. For the sake of time, I don't have a lot of time to get into the FAST Act today, but I strongly encourage you to check out our special issue paper because we did a detailed overview of what the FAST Act is, all of the different provisions and programs, and I can tell you this was not an easy feat. This was a lot of extensive internet searching, and this information is not as accessible as you would imagine it to be. So a few research questions for this paper. How can user insights from people aging with mobility disabilities highlight gaps in government policy and programs, as well as opportunities for improvement? And also, how do individual level transportation challenges among people aging with mobility disabilities compare to some of the barriers to coordinating and implementing these transportation programs? So I'll start off with some findings from Access. This slide shows a snapshot of our sample. We had 60 participants that ranged in age from 60 to 79. These individuals self-identified as having a mobility impairment for at least 10 years. So meeting that criteria of a long-term mobility disability. In terms of onset age of mobility impairment, this ranged from birth to age 49, with a median age of onset of 19 years. Education was distributed, ranging from less than high school to a doctoral degree. I've included a pie graph here that shows the breakdown of underlying causes of mobility impairment among our sample. About half of our sample had childhood polio and/or post-polio syndrome. Other causes of mobility impairment included neurological diseases or disorders such as MS, congenital conditions, spinal cord injury, other injuries and conditions as well. In Access, we focus on a variety of different transportation activities, which are listed here. Our current analysis was really focused on community participation and local transportation. So we decided to exclude 3 activities that were not as relevant to public policy and local transportation. So we excluded the 3 gray activities at the bottom: wayfinding, flying on an airplane, and walking as a pedestrian. The initial access study also did not focus on paratransit explicitly. We quickly realized in analyzing this data that paratransit is a very, very important transportation activity and challenge among this population. So it is included in the current analysis. And briefly, here's what we did to identify transportation challenges. We utilized an existing coding scheme for the access study to identify transportation challenges from participants' discussions of different sections of the interview. This included difficulty ratings for all transportation activities, in-depth challenges and response strategies for their most difficult transportation activity, satisfaction with transportation overall, as well as different transportation challenges that were identified in discussing community-based activities, such as going shopping. So I've highlighted here in these different boxes the key transportation challenges that emerged among this population in our access study. I've also included some illustrative quotes to help you get a sense of what these user challenges entailed. So the first challenge was lack of availability. And I love this quote because it really sums up a lot of findings from this analysis. This participant noted, "There's one taxi that is sometimes in existence. Usually Uber doesn't cover. There's no public transportation. There is no rail. There is no bus. In the last 20 years, a local transportation system for the aged and disabled has been developed. I know virtually nothing about it. All transportation I use is self-provided." Another common transportation challenge was related to safety. This was particularly concerning riding public transportation. This participant commented on injuries that they sustained due to wheelchair securement issues on a bus. Another transportation challenge had to do with physical limitations and health concerns of participants. This individual noted, "I break down the chair, I put it in the car. Now the shoulder's being shot, it hurts a little bit every time I do it." Financial limitations and concerns were really, we found this across all modes of transportation, particularly paratransit and driving. This person noted, "Sometimes the only accessible transportation in town is a wheelchair van, medical type service, and those are prohibitively expensive." Another transportation challenge that was not in our initial coding scheme was this challenge of advanced planning and the amount of waiting required for using certain services, particularly paratransit and relying on a ride from friends or family members. This person noted, "I have to be ready at the designated area at least half an hour before the time that I scheduled. It is the same way coming back. If I'm not at that designated area, they'll wait a couple minutes and then they leave. There is no guarantee they will come back if I call." Another new transportation challenge was this experience of societal attitudes and judgment among our participants. This individual noted that Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, she felt like she was being stigmatized. She said, "I don't think they're used to seeing somebody with a disability traveling and traveling alone. Every time I go somewhere, they say, 'Who's with you?' And I say I'm by myself. They make it seem like, oh, somebody let you out in public by yourself." You may have noticed that I glossed over accessibility, and that's not because it's not important, but because it is so in-depth. We found 5 different sub-themes in this area of accessibility challenges. I'm going to go ahead and show some of the quotes here so you can take the time to read, and I'll briefly go over these. Transferring, particularly transferring in and out of a vehicle, was a common issue expressed among our sample. Participants talked about not being able to get into a car that's with higher elevation, such as a minivan or an SUV, and needing a car that's level with their wheelchair. Steps and stairs. This was an issue for not only getting on and off the bus, but accessing a train or a subway. In situations where a lift is broken, participants commented on not being able to get to trains and subways. Limited access to accessible vehicles. This is true for driving, rideshare. participants commented that, finding a wheelchair accessible vehicle on Uber or Lyft or taxi is pretty much difficult to impossible to do. This person noted it's dependent on the number and existence of accessible vehicles in the fleet. Wheelchair access and storage was another issue that came up both for public and private transit. This participant noted on riding a bus, when the bus pulls up to the curb and there's another person on the wheel, another wheelchair user on there, I cannot get on. I have to wait for the next bus. And finally, another accessibility challenge had to do with the lack of handicap accessible spaces. I think one of the most striking findings from our research, or unexpected to me at least, was that the vast majority of our sample was driving and relying on a wheelchair accessible vehicle to do so, and also having to rely on the availability of handicap accessible parking. For the sake of time, I won't get too in depth with this, but one of the many FAST Act activities included trying to understand what are the barriers to coordinating transportation services among employees at the state and local level. So there was in 2018, a series of focus groups, as well as a nationwide survey that was looking at what are these top 10 barriers to coordinating transportation services for older adults, people with disabilities, and low income individuals. And the top 10 are listed here. Just to go over a few very briefly: limited awareness of federal funding and funding sources and policies, such as the FAST Act, program restrictions, insufficient incentives, unengaged stakeholders, limited federal guidance. All of these were creating challenges to implementing the vast array of funding that was available through the FAST Act. And I know I'm at just about time, but I'll just say as a teaser to check out our special issue paper, because we get in depth kind of looking at how these barriers to coordinating transportation services have potential areas of correspondence and linkages between these transportation challenges that we identified among end users. So just some couple final takeaways. Many transportation barriers that people aging with mobility disabilities experience are related to accessing transportation that can safely and effectively accommodate their mobility aids. On the public sector, there's a need to expand wheelchair seating availability, provide wheelchair securement training for drivers, and reduce service restrictions of paratransit. In the private sector, there's a need to expand availability of wheelchair accessible vehicles and taxi and rideshare services. And also, people aging with mobility disabilities need alternatives to driving or relying on rides from family and friends. The complex requirements and limited guidance of federal initiatives like the FAST Act can lead to barriers in service implementation, as well as the ultimate challenges experienced by end users. And our findings really point to the importance of engaging both service providers and end users with disabilities in all stages of transportation policy development. Thank you for your time. Attempting to stop sharing my screen. There we go. And I believe Laura Rice is next.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation, Elena. I didn't know too much about the FAST Act, so that was great to learn about that. So just 1 second, I will share my screen. I'm actually getting a notification that my screen sharing has been disabled.
Can you try it now?
Yep. All right. All right. Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me to this session today. My talk today is on insights on an automated fall detection device designed for older adult wheelchair and scooter users, a qualitative study. I want to thank my co-authors, Alexander Foote, who was one of my undergraduates or master students now when he did this project, Michaela Frechette, Rachel Brokenshire, Liebeck Abu, Peter Peter Presti, who's a co-investigator, he's at Georgia Tech, Harsha Mahajan, another co-investigator, Jacob Sosnoff, and the project director, Wendy Rogers. Okay. And I just want to note the funding source is the same project that Elena was just talking about. This project is funded by NIDLR. Sorry, I forgot an L. All right, so what we'll be focusing on today is first to discuss problems associated with falls among individuals who use wheelchairs and scooters, kind of set the stage of why we are actually trying to develop this device, and then understand limitations of fall detection devices on the market. And then finally, become aware of the preferences for an automated fall detection device expressed by individuals who use wheelchairs and scooters. All right, so first looking at kind of the state of the problem. So individuals who use wheelchairs and scooters fall very frequently. About 60% experience at least one fall over their lifetime. But when we look at different populations, we can see that it does increase. So among individuals living with multiple sclerosis, about 75% report at least one fall in a 6-month period of time. And then among individuals living with spinal cord injury, almost 70% report at least one fall in a 12-month period. And falls can be pretty significant. Almost 70% of fatal wheelchair accidents are caused by falls. And this is compared to about 30 to 40% of falls experienced of older adults who experience falls at least once per year. So obviously, the first line of defense for fall management is to prevent it from occurring. But unfortunately, there's limited peer review fall management programs. My team is working on one, but there's just not a lot out there. Also, it's important to remember that total prevention isn't possible. There's always going to be something that comes up that a fall occurs. So it's really important that we really take a comprehensive approach to fall management. So first off, it's first important to identify individuals who are at risk so that they can get more education, engage in fall management interventions. But as I just mentioned, total prevention isn't possible, even regardless of how much education you have. So there really needs to be something situated kind of at this end point where people can have kind of a safety net that if they do fall, they have a way to get assistance to get up so they aren't stranded somewhere. So that's kind of the reason why we're doing this project. So we'll look more about that period after a fall occurs. So some of the problems that can occur are injury, delayed initial recovery or laying on the ground for a long period of time, challenges with getting up or recovery, and then also developing a fear of falling or that can limit participation in desired activities. So this project isn't going to do much about preventing injury, but we can tackle some of these other portions during the aftermath of a fall. So we'll just go into these just a little bit more detail. So first, kind of that idea of lying on the ground for a long period of time, lie time. So this is the period of time that a person is on the ground after a fall occurs. In previous research among ambulatory individuals, we don't have a lot specifically among wheelchair and scooter users, so we had to borrow from the ambulatory population. And we found that people who lie on the ground for over an hour or more, this is predictive of future injurious falls, a decline in performance of activities of daily living, increased hospital admissions, and also increased admissions to long-term care facilities. We did look more specifically among wheelchair users, almost 40 wheelchair users. We found that after a fall, people were lying on the ground for about 9 minutes, but this did range from 1 to 45 minutes, and about 10 people were on the ground for more than 10 minutes. So even a short period of time can be very significant. If a person has poor health status, maybe limited sensation, things can start to go bad very, very quickly. So it's important that people are able to get up off the ground very quickly. Something to add to the problem is that a lot of people need assistance to recover from a fall. So previous research, again, borrowing from the ambulatory population, has found that people who need assistance with recovery, this is associated with poor quality of life, serious injuries, or even death. And then in that same study, we kind of looked more specifically of those wheelchair and scooter users and found that almost 80% of wheelchair users need assistance to recover, compared to about 50% of ambulatory older adults. And then we did an analysis and found that manual wheelchair users who require assistance to recover had lower reports of community participation. And then kind of that final bullet point, the kind of final thing in the aftermath of falls is developing of a fear of falling. And this is more of a significant long-term issue. And so our research found that among 68 wheelchair users, about 61% reported a fear of falling. But probably more significantly is the fact that of those individuals, about 50% stopped doing activities that were important to them because of this fear of falling. And we also found a relationship between fear of falling. As fear went up, quality of life decreased, and also control over participation. Because of all these things, we found it was important to develop an automated fall detection device that was specific for wheelchair and scooter users. So you might be thinking, oh, there's plenty of devices out there on the market, but unfortunately, there's a lot of limitations when it comes to individuals who use wheelchairs and scooters. So most significantly, these devices have been designed for ambulatory people falling from a standing position. And our research has found that falls from a wheelchair are distinct. Recently, we did an assessment of the Apple Watch that has a built-in fall detection system. And we found when a fall occurred from a wheelchair, the Apple Watch was only able to detect less than 5% of those falls that occurred. It was best detecting forward falls. So of the 14 falls it was able to detect, 9 of them were in the forward direction. And we found that detection can be influenced by the height of the individual, how hard they were actually hitting the ground, lower limb function. If they were able to slow themselves down more, it actually was harder for the watch to detect that a fall was occurring. And then fall direction, so better at detecting falls in the forward direction. And then some other limitations. So there are some devices where the person can trigger it themselves. But previous research shows that a lot of people don't want to do that. They don't want to bother their family, their friends. They don't want EMS coming to their house. So they actually, even when they fall, they don't trigger it. And a lot of devices like the one shown in this picture are very obtrusive. And finally, often there's limitations on who is called. So a lot of times the only option is for the device to notify emergency services. And a lot of people don't want that, want an ambulance coming to their house, especially if it is more of a minor fall. So again, they choose not to use it. All right, so because of all this, we wanted to develop a device that was specific for wheelchairs and scooter users. So we wanted to be able to reliably, automatically summon assistance in the event of a fall. We wanted to give people the ability to select who is called. We wanted to make it non-device specific. So we wanted it to be able to be used if a person switches chairs during the day, or maybe they do get up and walk for a little bit, and also to preserve dignity of the individual. So far, we have done 2 phases of the study. We've looked at actually what a fall looks like from a wheelchair, and looked at those acceleration patterns. And then phase 2, where we actually were developing a prototype. But a really important part of it, in the focus of my presentation today, was feedback from participants on the preferences of the device itself. So we did a semi-structured interview with participants who use wheelchairs and scooters. These were all individuals who were full-time wheelchair and scooter users, and had experienced at least 1 fall in the past 3 years. And we also do quantitative assessments on technology acceptance. So we had 15 participants in our study, living with a variety of different health conditions. Individuals were almost 70 years old and had been using a wheelchair for a long time, on average about 23 years, and had experienced an average of 3 falls in the past 12 months. So first we asked some questions, some quantitative questions about their perceived usefulness of a fall detection device, specifically for wheelchair and scooter users. And we found that all of the participants either agreed or strongly agreed with the following statements. They felt that it would increase their ability to recover from a fall, decrease lie time after a fall, decrease their fear of falling, and would be useful both inside and outside of their house. And then we did have some participants who were currently using a fall detection device. So we asked them a little bit about, how their feelings were about that. So participants did report that they did feel like it helped them to recover when they were alone. Like this participant indicated that like when their significant other was away, that was a time that they really liked to use it. But we did have a lot of people indicate that they were challenged to find something that really fits their needs. So a lot of people really didn't feel kind of confirmed our ideas that there really wasn't something great on the market for them. And then we talked about kind of looks of the device. Most people wanted a conservative, sleek, small device. One person was really interested in it being very colorful, but most people wanted it to just kind of blend in with their jewelry, their outfit, and so on. As far as the form, most individuals were interested in a watch form. They felt like this would kind of integrate into the things they were already wearing and so on. And they definitely emphasized the need for wireless charging. Some participants did express some concerns about donning and doffing. So really need to make sure there's like an elastic band or there's an easy strap so the person can easily get it on and off. Same thing with the charging. People didn't want to have to be messing with really small wires and so on. They just wanted an easy way to charge the device. Then we asked about who they wanted to be notified in the event of an emergency, and kind of the usual suspects that you would think. But the most important thing that they talked about was the ability to easily change who is notified. So maybe they have a care partner who's going on vacation. They don't want to bother that person when they're in Florida and they're in Illinois. So they want to be able to change easily who is notified. And we are going to develop a mobile application so that they can do that, kind of easily on the fly. And then just some other preferred features, like how the notification is actually sent. We had kind of a split decision between either a short message service, a text, or a call. It did kind of depend on who they were thinking would be notified. Some people felt like, if it was like a younger person, they might respond better to a text. If it was going to EMS, some people were concerned that they may not be able to intake that text and so on. So wanted the ability to, again, kind of switch back and forth depending on the person that they were actually trying to contact. And they also wanted to have some form of feedback that actually that message was received and that help was on the way. And people also talked about the desire to have the ability to disable a notification if there was a false alarm. And, this person, as they say, false alarms definitely happen. So, again, kind of this thing of not wanting to be bothering people and so on. Again, there was kind of a split decision on how long that period of time should be. Some people said a minute, some people said 5 minutes. So we are going to give people the ability to adjust within a 5-minute period of time. So our participants did indicate a need for an automated fall detection device to help facilitate recovery from a fall. They did indicate some challenges with previous fall detection devices and gave us a lot of really great feedback on how to design a device to specifically meet their needs. So kind of our next steps, we have been working on developing the mobile application that is associated with the fall detection device based on this feedback. And we are going to be starting our community testing in December. All right, so thank you so much.
Okay, I think that it is me.
Yes.
I hope that I would like just a little feedback on how my audio is. I was having a little bit of issue. Can people hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Okay. Let me share my screen. Thanks so much for those presentations. This has been really, really interesting. And I'm excited to be able to come back for a second week. So I'm kind of doing, hi everyone, my name is Lily Greiman. I'm getting there. All right. I'm a member of the RTC Pickle team and also work at the Research and Training Center on Disability in Rural Communities. And I want to apologize that I have a bit of a cold and may lose my voice. This will be the most I've spoken in a couple days. I'm doing a little bit of a follow-up presentation from last week on home usability, which is one component of the intervention programs that we've been implementing through the Pickle project. So this is based on a paper called The Usable Home, a qualitative investigation of the relationship between home usability and community participation for people with disabilities. Funded by NIDLR, part of the Pickle project. I really want to recognize my co-authors, Doctors Lindsay, Jay Schultz, and Dot Neary, all also partners on the Pickle project. And I want to apologize last week that I failed to acknowledge co-authors on that presentation. So apologies to Kelsey, Bryce, and Craig for that. I think that some of them are on there. This manuscript will be in the special issue, so we really encourage, I don't know if we'll send a link out to that or how we'll get that out, but really encourage folks to get into it. So as I talked last week about an intervention really that was focused on making home usability changes in order to promote community participation. And a core component of that program is really recognizing that home usability, this concept of home usability, is complex. And it's not just about accessibility. It's not necessarily about a required universal standards or codes, but really about individualized needs and accommodations within people's homes. Because really the spaces in which we live are complex, and the needs we have inside our homes are not necessarily cut and dry. How we interact in these spaces is highly individualized. So just a little bit about the study context, as I said, as part of promoting interventions for community living. Really, this study is based on kind of theoretically framed from the social model of disability and then the International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health as a framework for understanding participation of people with disabilities. I just have a little quote here from the paper. By thinking about the home environment more dynamically, home usability recognizes that there's not a clear line delineating the home from the community. In fact, the home is an integral part of the community in which a person lives. It's a space to rest and recuperate, a site where people prepare themselves to go out into the community, but also a place where you bring community in. So as part of this project, this is also part of that same study I talked about last week, Efficacy Study 1. We asked, how does home usability influence participation within the home and out in the community? And this is a qualitative study. We did a qualitative analysis of 12 semi-structured interviews. We purposefully sampled participants in the study to capture a range of housing experiences. So while we were able to get participants that lived, that rented, that owned, that lived in apartment complexes, that lived in single family homes, that lived with family members, that lived alone, we it really actually ended up limiting the demographic diversity of our sample. So our consumers in this study were mostly white, mostly women, aged ranges from 21 to 65, but mostly in the upper end of that. Folks had a range of education levels from high school degrees to graduate level degrees, but almost everyone was unemployed with lower levels of income. Nearly all of the interviews were conducted in the home with the participant, which is wild to think about now because we're in COVID. And they were conducted in Montana and then in Kansas and Missouri. They sat at Kansas City. We uploaded and transcribed and analyzed the data in a software program called MaxQDA and used the iterative analysis and coding procedure to ensure that we had concordance between researchers analyzing the data. So really what we found were that results revealed that personal, social, and environmental factors influence home usability and in turn one's ability to participate in the community. So what I have here is a little funnel diagram graphic. It's got like a funnel, and within it are these three circles, one that says social, one that says personal, one that says environmental. And then I'll go down the funnel and come out, and that's home usability with an arrow moving towards community participation. So I'm going to go through each of these social, personal, environmental factors next with some quotes that really highlight how these factors have a role to play in the home. One thing that we unfortunately weren't able to dive into nearly as much within the study was really the interactions between all of these factors. And I think that's where we'll hopefully start moving next as we have a much larger qualitative component as part of our next study. Because really these things, social, personal, environmental factors, none of these factors exist in these neat little bubbles that are on this graphic. They are closely entwined. And some of these quotes start to really reveal those connections. But I think more data will help us flesh out how all of these things reinforce and interact with each other. So personal factors emerged, and personal factors relate to an individual's health and function. Subthemes that are associated with personal factors are physical health, mental health, and perceived safety. And the next slide will be some quotes from participants really highlighting these. So in terms of physical health, we have Connie, 49-year-old woman. I realized I wasn't able to get around in my bathroom. I still need handicap faucets because I can't turn the bathtub off, if that makes sense. It's got one of those knobs. It's kind of like a dial thing, but it's hard for me to turn because I lost 225 pounds 4 years ago when I had surgery to lose weight. I lost all my strength too. We had a participant whose home environment significantly impacted her mental health in terms of conflict and anxiety due to neighbor relations, in which she stated, Tina, 57-year-old woman, I had to take prescribed medication just to get through a day in that place. And all of these things have been changed. Safety also definitely emerged. In terms of fall, it's, we were just talking about fall risk, and the environment in which you're in has a really huge, plays this is one example of how the environment and health interact in terms of the risk of injury and feeling unsafe. And so we have Steve, a 50-year-old man. Yeah, it's the referring to the steps of the home entrance. It's been a pain ever since, even trying to get into it or use it. For me, it's just because there's a really wide step over, and it's just that slippery area where I could fall down and bust my butt or head. Social factors definitely also emerged. Social factors are comprised of interpersonal relationships, such as with families, friends, and neighbors, services and supports like access to and receipt of personal and social assistance, and then as well as kind of broader systemic issues, broader functioning systems like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, health insurance, and systemic issues such as encountering poverty and ableism, all interacted with the way that people viewed their home spaces and influenced their willingness, interest, ability to make changes also within their home. So yeah, I think an incredibly important thing of thinking about the home spaces that we're in is that we are often not in them alone. We share spaces with family, friends, roommates, caregivers. And so really thinking about that role that individuals plays. And so Cora, 57-year-old woman, yeah, her spouse helps me get dressed. I can't bend over to do my socks. And sometimes we got to remember that, and I have to remember that he's disabled too. He was in a motorcycle accident, so we kind of struggle. Really highlighting that, one person's home usability could really be mitigated and influenced by another person's home usability within the home. And there was, with this participant, some additional anxiety around asking for help from someone who also struggled to provide it all of the time, and the tensions that can arise from that. Relating to services and supports, Sherry, 6-year-old woman, the only thing that keeps me from doing what I can do is that I don't have a way to get there or don't have a ride. Give me a ride and I'm there. I'm really highlighting that there are these barriers. And so Sherry is I should highlight too that this participant got a ramp to leave the house, so now has access to the community, but needs transportation to actually get out into the community. So it ties in, I think, well with some of the stuff that Elaine was talking about. There aren't these clear lines around or between spaces. And then systems, Jocelyn, she is a 50-year-old woman living in public housing. I'm not risking my housing for anyone. I mean, I could do it. It's not worth the energy, but it's okay. I'm not going to fight with her about it. She's referring to the project, the project management, housing management person. I only had to wait 5 months to get housing, which is unheard of. So, I'm fine. I make concessions all the time. Really highlighting the role that poverty and lack of access to services like housing can have, in that the home she's in is not meeting her needs, but it is not, it feels like a risk to ask for help, and not a risk that she's willing to take. And then finally, environmental factors. So these environmental factors represent both the immediate home environment in terms of home design, layout, and quality, as well as the surrounding neighborhood and geographic location. So for example, in a neighborhood community, a rural area, or a specific place. So just a couple quotes here. We have April 21, who says, during flares, I've had a really hard time getting off the toilet. It's really weird the way my bathroom is. The door's right in front of you, and I had nothing to grab onto to get myself up. I'd leave it open and use the door knob to pull myself up. And so this is really talking, April lived in a mobile home that was quite tight space-wise, and was talking about how the design of the space, the only access she had to get off the toilet sometimes was to grab the doorknob, and would force her to leave the door open while she used the bathroom. And then geography. Nobody, this is Teresa, 65, nobody wants to help me. I wish to God I never would have bought a house and name is redacted. This is my honest to God feeling, because I don't feel like they're here to help us, specifically referring to some of the services that she needs. So she was in a program. This is an example of where geography and the environment intersects with systems, in that the systems that were available to help some people weren't available to help her, because she was not located in a community that was within a service area that were qualified for the assistance she was seeking. And we had a couple other where you could really see the intersection between design and environment, where how people make choices around the homes and the spaces they want to be in, is that certain accessibility concessions may be made for an environment that is more suitable for community participation. For example, moving to a different home that still has some accessibility issues, but is much nearer to the grocery store, for example. There's a balance that you have to make in doing that, and that really emerged in the trade-offs and concessions that individuals made and are forced to make all the time. So finally, just a couple things as I think I'm wrapping up with time. Just some conclusions and implications, and I just pulled some stuff from the paper here. Home usability is an interaction between an individual and their environment, illustrating how the two interact with and inform each other to produce an individual's lived experience in space. Homes matter for participation as they are critical sites of social engagement, entryways into the community, spaces of rest and rejuvenation from the community. And then these results really reveal a need to develop a more holistic housing and home modification programs and policies that invite consumer choice and control in addressing home usability concerns, while also ensuring that these programs and policies are attainable by all. And the houses, I've got these houses in the corner, yellow and red houses, that are the home usability program logo. Thanks. So that's it for me, and I think I'm going to pass the proverbial baton over to Lindsay. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Lily. That was great. Okay, I'm going to try to do this right. I know it's not working yet, but I pushed the button.
We see your desktop, Lindsay.
I know.
Okay.
I'm trying to put it into, there we
There
go.
you go. You got it.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I have to echo some previous comments. These presentations have been really informative. So thanks, everybody. Okay, so I'm Lindsay. I'm with the University of Kansas in the Research and Training Center in the Pickle Project. And here I'm going to present a study that we did sort of off the cuff when all the COVID stuff started happening. And our title, as it explains, is examining the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on community engagement for people with mobility disability. And then many of my co-authors are here today as well. Lily Greiman, who just spoke with the University of Montana, Jay Schultz, Kelsey Goddard, Isaac Mizuki, and Dr. Jean Hall, all from the University of Kansas. Okay, let me see. Oh, there we go. All right. So the limited research that has been done to explore the effects of the pandemic for people with disability, we have found that individuals with disability are disproportionately affected by the pandemic, especially in a negative way compared to those without disabilities. We found that this is, well, not we, but researchers in general have found that this is often due to the residential situations. So living in group homes, if someone there contracts COVID, it goes through everyone pretty quickly. The need for outside support and services. So many folks need outside support and services to complete activities of daily living, and that increases their risk of obviously exposure to COVID. Places of employment for many people with disability, they're considered an essential worker, or in some sort of service job where they're around a lot of other folks. And then the accommodations that conflict with health recommendations and mandates. For people with disability, this might include things like wearing a mask or keeping 6 feet of distance between one another. That can be difficult, if not impossible. So the goal of this study was to document the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on people with mobility disability across a variety of community participation topics. So we were able to inquire about the effects of the pandemic on access to family and friends, access to essential items such as groceries or prescriptions or medical supplies, how we wanted to find out how the pandemic had affected employment and education, access to transportation, as well as perceptions of and engagement in the community. So we wanted to learn how community engagement perceptions had maybe changed, and then kind of learn the other ways in which people are engaging in their community. So for this study, we had surveyed 39 participants, predominantly female. They ranged in age from 24 to 92 years. Most of them were not employed at the point of data collection. And just to make a note that we collected this data roughly between May and August of last year of 2020. We administered surveys. Here's a survey question example. So how has the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent social distancing mandates affected your employment or education? The response options for the participants were either not changed, become worse, improved, or simply not applicable. Now, if the participant reported worsening or improved conditions, they were then prompted to elaborate with an open-ended response. So what I'm presenting here is the qualitative data from the open-ended responses. Our findings show that access to family and friends, this includes personal care assistance, was the most negatively affected community participation topic of all the topics that we asked about. So this participant expressed the fact that she had not seen her son for visitation, spring break, or Easter, and I will probably not see him for Mother's Day either. These are all first times being apart from him like this, and I've not been able to visit friends. Another person noted that we are on stay-at-home order, so we haven't seen anyone in person. My mother lives in a nursing home and has tested positive, and we can't see her. So the social isolation was incredibly evident with our data here. A third participant noted that nobody wants to come over, nor do I really want anybody over. So it was that juxtaposition of needing and wanting contact with others, and yet needing and wanting to be safe and healthy as well. And then one participant noted that when they weren't able to let in their personal care assistant, I've been pushing myself on a few occasions to handle things physically that I normally would have gotten help with and ended up with injuries because of either pushing myself too hard or becoming accident prone due to fatigue after doing too much by myself. So all of this access to others really resulted in, as we can see here, injury or even damage to the house at times. We did ask about access to food and groceries as well, so essential items, but food and groceries emerged as a really a worsened activity, if you will. I have pictures here of a grocery bag with some groceries coming out of it and then a grocery cart. So this participant expressed that I've been using Kroger, which is a grocery store in some parts of the country, Kroger's Instacart app. So I've been using Kroger's Instacart app. I have had to spend money I don't have on delivery service. There are fees and markups on food that I would normally spend. So we noticed that participants had a response strategy to this challenge related to accessing food and groceries, but it came with an extra cost. Not only does it come with an extra cost, but this participant also noted that grocery delivery is non-contact, so I have to be able to lift, carry, and put away what the store packed for me. Access to transportation was a worsened topic as well. Here I have an icon of a bus. And this first participant said that I am working on a paratransit application, which can take 2 to 3 months to get approved during non-COVID times. So in other words, they're waiting a long time for their paratransit application. I am hesitant to use paratransit as they have dumped me out of my wheelchair before. And this kind of echoes some of the research material that was presented from Elena earlier. And then with the risk of COVID-19, this participant really didn't want to take public transportation. The next participant pointed out that public transports go less places and my job does not change to what is available for the bus route. So not only does limited access to transportation or public transportation in this case impact participants' ability to get where they need to be and get the items that they need to get, but it can also affect their ability to get to and from work. Employment and education. Here I have two icons of it looks like a computer screen with some participants on maybe a Zoom call, and then a desk with some computers. We had one participant who was currently in school, and they noted that my education status has gotten worse as there's only so much that can be taught from home, especially in the organic chemistry lab course. The experience is not as fulfilling, and I don't feel as motivated to watch lectures and retain the material. Another participant reported changes, not changes to their employment, but they've been able to work at home. So this participant said that I work for a radio station. I've not been able to do my on-air weekend shifts in a month. A lot of my day-to-day work I can do from home, but I don't have my work computer here. And I'm having to use my personal computer, excuse me, and it's taxing the system. So this participant was able to work at home and be quote unquote safe, but having to use their own computer system and not have the same devices, tools and technology that they have at work. Another participant reported a change in her hours and pay. So she said, we got a pay increase of $2 an hour, but our hours are cut to 15 per week. So it was kind of this like, well, we'll pay you more, but you get to work less. I've been given 8 to 10 inferring hours per week. I have a weak immune system. I'm trying hard not to quit and be sensible. This job accommodates my disability, so I'd like to keep it. We also found that technology as a response strategy emerged as a theme. Here I have an icon of a little Wi-Fi signal. And a lot of participants said, well, I'm trying to use this technology or that technology to either connect with others or maintain employment and things like that. But we noticed that there were emerging problems with this technology. So here, one participant said that any participation with the community is limited to telephone, text, Zoom, and my front porch. The next participant said, even though I do keep in touch with my family via phone and social media, it's just not the same. And then another participant said that my internet is not secure and it drops, and that the videos go in and out due to poor internet service. So in summary, our results indicate that many participants reported adverse effects of the pandemic on their ability and willingness to engage in the community. Obviously, there's a hesitation to venture out in the community for the necessary items. So many participants resorted to using delivery services. However, these services came with not only exposure to whoever it was that was delivering the products, potentially if there was a no contact, but also additional financial burdens. Public transportation changes really affected our participants. We found in some cases the paratransit system shut down completely or reduced their hours of service or had a route change entirely. So this made it difficult for participants to access the necessary goods and services that they would normally get out in the community, and even their ability to get to and from work. We have some concern about the limited engagement with others that was reported from these participants, as social isolation has been found to have a negative psychological effect, particularly for folks with disability. And although technology was used to maintain some sort of connection with others, we found that accessibility and reliability issues emerged. And all of this research has implication for policy, service providers, and future emergency preparedness situations to support continued community engagement for people with mobility disabilities. So thanks everybody for listening to that.
Wonderful. Well, I just wanted to say thank you to all the speakers and the attendees on the call for attending our second State of the Science Conference webinar series. So I did want to kind of post in the chat box and orient people to the Lifespan Institute YouTube channel, where this is currently being recorded and going live, and will be archived for the purposes of sharing for years to come. So please check out and subscribe to the Lifespan Institute YouTube channel and hit the bell to receive any kind of notifications for new videos that are being uploaded. And then also, we just wanted to open it up now to questions and answers from any audience members. I did note that a couple of Q&A were coming in early. Just wanted to kind of but I will read this. Being defined or measured, and that was for Elena's study, and Lindsay was able to answer. It was defining. Also asked where to find the paper on the FAST Act that was mentioned during Elena's presentation, and able to kind of a box, but also I just wanted to read the title of that paper for folks who might be listening on the phone. So that title of the paper is Transportation Challenges for Persons Aging with Mobility Disability, Qualitative Insights and Policy. And yes, we will have about 15 more minutes for questions from the audience. If folks want to type this in the Q&A box, or you can voice your questions. So thank you.
I'll just quickly comment that I placed into the chat box a link to the open access articles available at the Disability and Health Journal website. All of the presentations from today were based on articles that are published there, as well as articles that were covered in last week's webinar.
Thank you, Jean. And I'm not seeing any questions at this time. So we can give it another minute, and then I think we can conclude our webinar. I see Daniel's asking, where can we find the slide deck for today's presentation? For the Research and Training Center on Independent Living, we have a website that we will be creating a web page to that will archive the presentations from today, and then additionally the YouTube recordings. But if you want to get a presentation PowerPoint, you can email me and I can definitely work with you on that. I will put my email in the chat, but it's Kelsey, Kelsey dot Shinnick, SHINNICK at ku.edu. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much to everyone again, our presenters and attendees on the call. I think we can conclude today's webinar, but just really appreciate you all being here today. And I learned a lot myself, and I'm seeing one more that Lily said, thanks all. So fantastic. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day.